My name is Tom, and I'm 17 years old. I'm one of those guys who's always looking for an excuse to film something scary and upload it to YouTube. I don't know. I think there's something addictive about the idea of going viral, of millions of people seeing what you do and talking about it. That day, however, I had no idea what I was in for. The McBarge, as everyone called it, was a forgotten relic of Expo 86 in Vancouver. It had been a floating McDonald's restaurant built with the idea of showcasing technology and luxury. But the dream didn't last long. After the fair, it was abandoned, floating on the water like an empty shell. Over the years, it has become the center of many spooky stories. Some said they had seen lights come on at night. Others spoke of strange noises and figures moving inside. For me, it was the perfect place to shoot a viral video. I wasn't going to do it alone, of course. I convinced Sam, my best friend, to go with me. Sam had always been the kind of friend who had your back, even if he complained all the time.
This is a bad idea, Tom. What if we get caught? What if the boat sinks with us inside?
That's why we bring flashlights and cameras, Sam. If anything happens, it'll be recorded. He rolled his eyes, but he knew he was already in the game. We weren't going to back down. The McBarge was more deteriorated than I expected. The paint was peeling, and there was graffiti everywhere. The smell of rust and stagnant water filled the air, but I didn't care. We made it inside without the dock security guard seeing us. We walked along the floating gangway, and after a couple of pushes, managed to open a side door. Inside was chaos. Pieces of the ceiling hung down, and the floor creaked with every step. There were overturned tables and chairs, some still with rotting plastic trays on top. Still, it had a strange charm, as if time had frozen. I turned on my camera and started recording. Guys, we're at the McBarge. This is crazy. Everything is exactly as they left it decades ago. Sam didn't talk much, but he wouldn't leave me alone either. He was walking behind me looking everywhere as if he expected something to jump out at us. After a few minutes, we heard a noise. It was like a thump, something falling on the floor above. We stood still.
What was that?
I don't know. Maybe the wind? I admit that the noise didn't sound like the wind, but I wanted to leave Sam alone or he'd want to leave. We climbed rusty stairs that creaked with every step. It was as if the ship was alive, breathing, vibrating with us inside. The second floor was a mess. There were shards of glass everywhere, and the smell was worse. However, what caught my attention the most was a figure at the end of the corridor. It was barely a shadow at first, but when I shined the flashlight on it, it moved. Did you see that?
Don't even think about going near it. Let's go. Use your brain. If that's not a ghost, it's a person.
Ignoring Sam, I moved forward. The figure had disappeared, but now I could hear something. A screeching sound, as if someone was dragging metal across the floor. It was constant, rhythmic, and getting louder. Suddenly, a door at the end of the hallway slammed shut.
Let's get out of here. If we don't turn around, I'll leave you alone.
I listened to Sam, but ignored him. I knew he wouldn't leave. This was just what we needed for the video. I pushed on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Behind us, we heard another noise. This time, it was footsteps, slow and heavy. When I turned around, there was no one there, but I could have sworn something was there. The silence was broken when a rumble shook the place. Something fell from the ceiling just a few feet from us. An old chair, which shouldn't have been able to move on its own. Sam let out a scream, and I stepped back, camera still in hand. That's when I saw it. A tall figure, dressed as Ronald McDonald. The McDonald's clown was walking toward us. His face paint was peeling, and his suit was stained and torn. Most disturbing were his eyes. They were sunken, dark, and giant.
Tom, that's not real. It can't be real.
We tried to run, but the doors began to close on their own, trapping us. We kept running, getting lost until we found a small exit that led to the main door. As we were about to arrive, the clown figure intercepted us. He caught us halfway and grabbed us both by the neck. We tried to fight it off, but we did absolutely nothing. The being did not move and pressed harder and harder. Worms and cockroaches started to come out of his unnaturally open mouth. I felt like I was going to vomit. The clown pushed us against the wall and squeezed us there. I could feel all the worms and cockroaches falling out of his mouth climb up the wall and onto us. I could feel them all over my body. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. The fingers squeezed tighter and tighter. Through my blurred vision, I saw Sam struggling just as I was, eyes wild. The clown was still closing in, his movements jerky like a broken puppet. My camera fell to the ground and the clown laughed even harder than before. When he was close enough, I could smell him. A sour stench like rotting meat. Then, the scream. It wasn't Sam's or mine. It was a high-pitched, almost inhuman scream that filled the whole place. Suddenly, the pressure on my neck disappeared and I fell to the ground. My vision blurred and everything went out. I opened my eyes with a start. We were at the entrance to the McBarge, lying on the cold, wet floor. Sam was beside me, panting, his eyes full of panic. In front of us, a security guard was shouting, furious. "What are you doing here? Get out of here before I call the police! Now!" We stood up awkwardly, still dazed. As we ran toward the deck, neither of us spoke. There was no point in trying to explain to anyone what we had seen. When we were finally far enough away, we stopped to catch our breath. We both wanted to ask each other the same questions. We both wanted to know if what we had seen was a dream or if it really happened. We both lifted as if it were a dream. But it didn't make any sense because if it was, we dreamt the exact same thing. We ended up assuming that everything that happened was true, but that we never actually entered the place, and it all happened in our heads. That means that the only reason we are alive is because of the scream of the security guard who inadvertently saved us. It was 2 days before I went back to the McBarge. This time, I wasn't going to go in. I just wanted to show my other friends the place from afar. There was something that kept haunting me, something I couldn't get out of my head. As I pointed out the rusted windows, I saw it. The silhouette of the clown was there staring at me from inside. He didn't move, didn't try to hide. He just raised a hand and waved, as if he was waiting for me.
My name is Andrew, and I work the night shift at a McDonald's outside of Chicago. The place is in an area where the few customers who come in after 10 p.m. are usually students with insomnia, couples, or people who don't want to go home. The nights used to be monotonous, cleaning the fryers, filling the soda machines, and dealing with customers upset about a botched order. But tonight was not going to be the same. From the moment I walked into work, something about the atmosphere was different. Not in a supernatural sense, but in the way the employees walked around in more of a hurry than usual, and the manager, Mark, kept looking at his watch. At about 11:45 p.m., it was just Mark, Chelsea at the register, me in the kitchen, and Frank, who was cleaning the restroom area. All seemed quiet until a man walked in. His presence was impossible to ignore. Tall, short hair, and a black jacket with spots that I didn't immediately make out. Chelsea tried to be friendly, but the guy didn't seem interested in good customer service. He asked for a simple combo. His voice was cold, almost mechanical. I paid attention because something about him made me feel alert. Not out of fear, but because he seemed out of place. I made the burger fast and passed it to Chelsea, who delivered it with a strange smile. The man said nothing. He took the bag, walked to a table in the corner, and sat down. So far, nothing too out of the ordinary. When he began to eat, the whole place fell silent, as if absorbing what little energy was left in that shift of dead people. Mark, always attentive to detail, approached me and whispered something that I didn't understand at first.
Did you notice his hands?
I turned to look at them and noticed they were stained. but not with sauce or anything typical of a customer. It was something dark, almost dry. I didn't comment, but the details stuck in my mind. A few minutes later, another man came in. This one was burlier, with a poorly manicured beard and a cap covering part of his face. He looked nervous, as if he didn't want to be there. He went straight to the counter, but didn't order any food. Instead, he asked Chelsea if she had seen anyone in a black jacket come in recently. Chelsea pointed to the man sitting in the corner. The burly man turned his head toward him and immediately tensed. He looked like he was going to approach, but Mark, more curious than cautious, stepped in and asked if he needed anything. The guy then pushed him out of the way and ignored him. Mark tried to act like he didn't care, but his face was pale. No one said anything else, but we all sensed something was up. The burly guy disappeared into the night, and the man in the black jacket was still eating as if nothing was disturbing him. At about 12:30 in the morning, the silence was interrupted by a rumbling sound. At first, I thought it was thunder, but when Frank came running out of the bathroom with a panicked expression, I knew something was wrong. "There's someone outside, banging on the trash cans." Mark went to the door to take a look, but couldn't see anything. "I'm sure it was a raccoon." "A raccoon making that sound? Would you rather go check it out?" "No." "You're right, it must be some kind of animal. Although if the noise continues, we'll call the police. Okay?" Just a few minutes later, the man in the black jacket got up. He walked towards the exit without saying a word, leaving his half-finished meal. We watched him leave, but he didn't go far. He stood by the door as if he was waiting for something or someone. No one dared to ask him what he was doing. It was then that a black van appeared in the parking lot. It had no visible license plates, and the lights went out as soon as the engine stopped. 3 men got out of the vehicle, all dressed similarly to the burly guy from earlier. One of them had a bat, and another was carrying something that looked like an iron bar. The atmosphere in the restaurant became even more tense. The 3 men who got out of the van walked towards the entrance with firm but calculated steps. From the kitchen, I could barely make out fragments of their conversation, choppy words laden with tension. There was no doubt that something serious was about to happen. Mark, always wanting to appear as if everything was under control, motioned for Chelsea to continue in the box as if nothing was wrong. Frank was in the corner of the service area pretending to check the ice cream machine, but his pale face betrayed his fear. I, from the kitchen, couldn't take my eyes off of what was going on in front of me. The man in the black jacket didn't move from his place by the door. One of the men in the van, the one carrying the iron bar, approached first. They whispered something, but from where I was, I couldn't hear it. Then, the one with the iron bar pointed it at the chest of the man in the jacket, demanding something. A transaction, I thought. Maybe money or something more obscure. The man in the black jacket remained impassive, but his posture changed slightly. It was subtle, but his presence seemed to grow as if he'd become more threatening without needing to move a muscle. Finally, he pulled something out of his jacket. A small package wrapped in dark plastic. The man with the bar took it, but instead of leaving, he began to speak in a louder voice, gesticulating aggressively. Something didn't seem right. Chelsea, visibly terrified, left the box and joined us. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't look away. The other 2 men started arguing with each other while the man at the bar waved the package in front of the man in the black jacket. Then, he punched the man in the jacket in the face. What happened next was almost unreal. The man in the jacket took a step back, bringing his hand to his face, but he didn't fall. His reaction was slow, as if he was assessing the situation. Then, with chilling calm, he pulled a pistol from his waistband. Mark frantically motioned us to duck behind the counter. "Take cover!" We didn't see the impact, but the sound of gunshots rang out loudly. I covered my ears and closed my eyes tightly, but even so, I could still hear the screams and the sound of bodies falling. When all was quiet, I slowly raised my head. The man in the jacket was standing around him. The three men lay motionless on the ground. Then something even more terrifying happened. The man turned his head slowly towards us. For a moment, our gazes met through the window. It was as if he could see right into my soul. Then, he started walking towards the entrance. He entered the restaurant with firm steps, his gun still in his hand. We stood, transfixed. Finally, he broke the silence with a deadpan voice. "I'm very sorry about this, but I can't leave any witnesses." Mark tried to speak, mumbling something about calling the police, but the man raised his gun, and Mark stopped immediately. Chelsea and Frank had already started backing toward the back door. "Run!" They managed to escape out the back door, but I tripped and fell to the ground. Before I could get up, the man was on me, pointing the gun at me. "No hard feelings, kiddo." I closed my eyes, expecting the worst. But then the man paused. Something had caught his attention. When I opened my eyes, I saw him staring at the ceiling. I followed his gaze and realized that he was looking at a security camera. At the same time, both the man and I heard the police sirens approaching. The man let out a sigh as if he was annoyed. So there were cameras. I have to have a serious talk with someone." He lowered the gun and looked at me one last time. "I am sorry for the mess." With those words, he ran out of the back door, losing himself in the night. Minutes later, the police arrived. They surveyed the scene and questioned all of us who remained. Although we described the man in the black jacket, it seemed clear that they would never find him. Everything pointed to an exchange between the mafia and local criminals that went horribly wrong. Lives ended that night. Mine almost ended as well.
Hello, my name is Jake, and like many of you may have done for a while, I worked at McDonald's. To be honest, it wasn't the best job in the world, but it paid the bills and gave me some extra money to hang out with my friends on the weekends. However, everything changed one night when I was assigned to the closing shift. It was a night like any other night. The restaurant was full of noisy customers, there was a lot of fried food smell, and the constant sound of the fryer and music from the speakers repeated endlessly and made my head hurt. Despite that, everything was going well until I heard a strange noise coming from the children's play area. Intrigued, I went over to investigate, thinking that perhaps a child had wandered in where they shouldn't have. I felt very uncomfortable with what was in front of me. In the darkest corner of the playground was the Ronald McDonald animatronic. This was one of the few McDonald's that had a Ronald animatronic, and it was very easy to understand why. It was really scary. His empty eyes seemed to follow me wherever I went, and his engraved laughter was so metrical I couldn't understand how a child who saw it wouldn't start crying and leave the restaurant. But worst of all, Ronald seemed to be moving. This animatronic was not supposed to move. I slowly approached to control him. I knew it couldn't move and that it was probably all part of my imagination, but even so, I did it just to be safe. The animatronic was still as creepy as ever, but it wasn't moving, so I left the playground and went back to my companions before they finished their schedules. After that, the evening proceeded normally. Little by little, my companions began to leave and leave me alone for the last hour. It was my first time I'd done the closing alone, but I'd been working there for a while, and honestly, I felt ready to do it. Just in case, my coworkers reminded me of the procedure I had to follow to make sure my boss wouldn't scold me the next day, and even stayed a little longer to make sure everything went smoothly. For the last 30 minutes of work, it was safe to say that I was completely alone. This McDonald's was relatively small, so it was to be expected that almost no one would come in at that time, so I was focused on cleaning up and making sure I had a good closing. Just before I left, with only a few minutes left, I hurried to finish cleaning the game area, and that's when I noticed something really strange. The animatronics, that Ronald animatronics that had disturbed me before, seemed to be in a different position. At that moment, I thought that someone had surely moved it, but why would they do it? To play a joke on me? It couldn't be. It was too subtle to be a joke, and it was very likely that I wouldn't even realize it. Besides, how would they have done it? I got a little closer to Ronald to examine him closely, and at that moment, I got the scare of my life. "Hey, kids! I'm Ronald McDonald!" "Oh my god! Oh, what a scare you gave me, you piece of junk!" "Hey, kids! I'm Ronald McDonald!" Hey kids, I'm Ronald McDonald. Hey kids, I'm Ronald McDonald. Oh, come on, did you break down? How do you turn this thing off? Okay, that's enough Ronald McDonald for today. Ah, great, more work. I must admit that the power outage had really caught me off guard. I thought about cleaning up, but I really couldn't, and it was almost time for me to leave, so I had every right to let people know what was going on and grab my stuff. I grabbed my cell phone and turned on the flashlight. The place definitely looked a lot more gloomy with a small spotlight illuminating the dark place. I locked the door to make sure no customers were coming in and went to get the cleaning supplies I had forgotten in the game room, and that's when I noticed something terrifying. Ronald's animatronic, it was gone. I quickly looked at the floor to see if it had fallen down, but that didn't make sense. How could something so big fall down without making noise? I pointed the flashlight everywhere, but it wasn't there. It was simply nowhere to be found. In my worst moment of confusion, I heard a voice coming from the bathroom door. That voice was very familiar. Hey kids, I'm Ronald McDonald. I quickly pointed to the source of the sound, and that's when I saw it. The animatronic was there, standing in the dark next to the bathroom door, staring in my direction with red eyes. No. This can't be happening. Hey kids, I'm Ronald McDonald! Frozen, I could only watch as the animatronic that seemed to be broken repeated his name constantly, until I saw something else that made me forget about him. Hidden behind the huge figure of the animatronic, looking at me from the shoulder of the robot, there was someone else. It was almost imperceptible, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. It was a silhouette, like a shadow with fiery eyes and huge fangs. I could distinguish how his face was black but with red spots and a horrible snake tongue that stretched out as if provoking me. At that moment, I was paralyzed with fear, and the next words of the animatronics I heard were much closer. Hey kids, I'm Ronald McDonald! Hey kids, I'm Ronald McDonald! Hey kids, I'm Ronald McDonald! Before I knew it, the animatronic was running towards me at full speed. His arms were up, going for my neck. That Ronald-shaped animatronic was planning to choke me. My only reaction was to close my eyes in fear, and that's when a beam of light pierced my eyebrows. Confused and still terrified, I opened my eyes again. The light had returned, and in front of me, where Ronald's animatronic had come from to attack me, there was nothing. When I turned around, Ronald's animatronics were still in their usual position, without moving, but with a big difference. His head was in another position. It was looking at me. As soon as my body could react again, I grabbed all my things and left the place as soon as possible, never to return. The next day, I handed in my resignation. What was I going to do? Tell them that Ronald comes to life during the night? Insinuate that there is a demon in McDonald's? All I tried to do was ask some of my other coworkers if they saw anything strange on the night shift, but they were very confused by my question. Apparently, only I experienced something like that in that McDonald's. And you know, I know what I saw. It may be several years later, but I still don't walk anywhere near that place. Just because I'm the only person who has ever seen that animatronic in action doesn't mean that no one else ever will. And when that happens, maybe that person won't be able to tell their story like I am now.
Hola! That means hello in Spanish. Hey, Happy Meal guys! It's a great day for a picnic, isn't it?
At McDonald's Land, it's always a great day for a picnic.
You're right, but today our picnic is going to be a bit different than the ones we've had before.
Are we going to picnic?
Most of you must have ordered food from a fast food restaurant at least once in your lifetime. These days, it's done by food delivery apps. But back in the early 2000s, it was delivered by a person from the fast food restaurant chain itself. Today, I'm about to share an incident that happened with me and my father in the year 2006. Before I continue with the story, I'd like to tell you something about myself. I'm Yuri Kim. I was born in South Korea and moved to the U.S. with my father when I was 16. After my mother's death, my father got a better job opportunity here in the States, and that's when we moved here. The best part of being here was the food. No offense, but after eating traditional Korean food for 16 years, the burger and French fries were very tempting. So, in our initial days, I and my father used to try different types of foods every weekend. And during our quest of tasting new foods, we quickly realized that McDonald's was one of our favorite places to eat. Not only was it cheap, but the different types of burgers, shakes, nuggets, and fries were delicious. Now that I look back at it, I feel extremely silly. However, even today, I sometimes sneak a burger just for nostalgia. The house we lived in was pretty close to downtown, so whenever we were too tired or just lazy to get out there and get our food, we used to order burgers, shakes, and fries from McDonald's. Usually, back in the day, the delivery people had specific areas of the town assigned to them. That means the guy who would deliver our order was the same all the time. Whenever he used to come to our home, he used to say, "Howdy, Kims," in a thick southern accent. One evening, Dad was late from his office.
Hey, Yuri, do you mind ordering our usual from the McDonald's? I'm really tired, so I won't be cooking today.
Sure. Do you want anything extra?
Nay, the regular is good.
Dad said, and then went to his room to freshen up. I sat there in the living room watching TV. When the doorbell rang after half an hour, I was expecting a knock following it and a "Howdy, Kims" in a deep southern accent. But that never came. This got me a bit worried.
Yuri, darling, let me get the door. It could be anyone.
Dad had walked out of his room and answered the door. A man stood there, wearing a McDonald's uniform and holding what seemed like our order. When he saw Dad, he said,
"Your order, sir. That would be $16.49.
He was not much older than, to be honest, 19 at the most. He looked pretty cute, too. If Dad wasn't there, I might have even asked him for his number.
Thank you, boy.
Dad said to the delivery boy, paid him, and then we settled on our table to eat our burgers, fries, and nuggets.
That was odd. Usually, Sandro delivers our orders.
Dad commented while eating. Maybe Sandro does not work there anymore. Or it could be that this guy is covering for him this one time, I suggested.
Possibly. Maybe next time when Sandro comes, we can ask him about it.
With that, we continued eating our food. A few minutes later, our doorbell rang, and a knock followed, and a deep voice said, "Howdy, Kims," in a southern accent. For a second, Dad and I exchanged a weird look.
Seems like there was confusion.
Dad said. We opened the door, and a short, smiling man stood on our steps, wearing a McDonald's uniform and holding what appeared to be our order.
Was wondering when we'd meet again.
Sandro said.
Hi, Sandro. I think there has been a mistake.
Dad said.
You see, we received an order a few minutes ago. We have already eaten more than half of it.
How's that possible? I just got here. I know I'm a bit late, but that's because we are seriously understaffed.
Well, maybe the girl who took our order may have messed up and sent two people with the same order to the same address.
That's possible. Cindy is a bit lousy. She could have done it. No problem, fellas. I can take this back. You guys have a good night.
With that, Sandro drove off. Dad and I were both too tired that night, so instead of informing the McDonald's employees about the mistake they had made, we decided to talk to the manager some other time. That night, I thought about that cute delivery boy and ways in which I maybe could meet him again, away from the watchful eyes of my father. Even though there were a few social media sites back then, I was on none of them, so stalking the cute McDonald's employee on social media was out of the question. However, the McDonald's was just a few blocks away. I knew most of the employees there, so if I asked them about the boy, they would surely help me, right? So with a concrete plan in my mind and a warm feeling in my heart, I slept like a baby that night. The next day, I walked into the McDonald's after school and first of all told Cindy how she had messed up, which she of course denied. Then I went to a counter and asked the lady about the delivery boy I wanted the information on. To my delight, She turned out to be the manager's wife and a hopeless romantic. So in order to help me, she showed me the employee photo that they took every year. She told me that most of the employees were steady, so there were chances that my mystery boy would probably be in last year's employee photo. The woman scrolled through her phone looking for the photo, which was super difficult as there were no touch phones back then. She was pressing a zillion buttons on the little thing she called her phone, and I grabbed a large chocolate milkshake. Finally, when I had reached the bottom of my milkshake, the woman approached me, smiling. "Hey dear, here's the photo you were looking for. Just point out the guy and I will give you his number." I immediately spotted him. The same shy smile I had seen him give my dad last night. "Here, that's him." For a moment, the woman stared at the screen, and then at me, back and forth. "Are you sure, darling? This was the guy who delivered your order last night?" "Yeah, I'm pretty sure," I replied, still smiling, and hopeful that I would get that boy's number. "What's his name?" Ethan Guevara," the lady said, and in a different tone, as if visiting a sad memory. Meanwhile, I had already fallen in love with his name. "So, can you give me his number now?" "Well, I can, but honey, it's useless. You might want to sit for this," she said. "Why? What happened?" "I don't know any soft way to say this, but Ethan is dead. He passed away last year, shortly after this picture was clicked. A car accident while delivering an order. He was a good kid." "What? You are kidding, right? I literally saw him yesterday. You can ask my dad. He saw him too." "Honestly, I don't know what to say to you, darling. I don't know what you saw yesterday, but I can assure you that boy has been 6 feet deep for over a year." I had no way to process the information, so I just ran home and locked myself in the room. We literally ate the food that Ethan delivered. How could he not be real? At least I had an internet connection, so I did some digging and found a news article with Ethan's picture describing the accident that killed him. Apparently, it was a big thing. A drunk truck driver had crashed into his car and killed him on the spot. This means the boy I saw that night was indeed a ghost.